What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a hand from Poker After Dark. It's a hand between Justin Young and Daniel Negreanu. Let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Yesterday, there's a guy in our 10-20. We were playing 10-20-40 no limit, I think, at Bellagio. We were playing the deuce, seven deuce, right?
Okay.
Talking about Dana?
Yeah, Dana. This guy, our friend Dana. He'd never played.
Okay.
And we tried to explain it to him. How long did he play before?
It was like 3 hours.
It was 3 hours.
Dude, it was a long time.
3 hours.
Okay.
He thought if you just had a 7 or a deuce in your hand, he was like in every hand going nuts.
And he just kept on bluffing with a random 7 or a deuce in his hand, and we're just looking at him like, and finally someone's like, you don't have to have just one.
You have to have both.
That's definitely not the 7 deuce game.
Yeah, he got mad and got up.
Rob handled it better.
Negreanu from the small blind with the 3-bet to 3K, and that always piques the suspicions of the table.
You just didn't pay him. So, is that
Keno
how
the villain
included?
made it 600 to go.
He never got away with one of them, so he didn't really
Now
know.
Justin
that's
pops it even
so
further with
funny
ace-queen
and
off
awful.
out of the big.
Oh, he just. I've just heard the story. I wasn't there. He just kept getting all his
He
called all the
bluffed
time.
like
Oh my
king
God.
7 off, and then like
So
jack
terrible.
deuce off, and we're just looking at him like, why is he's taking these absurd lines with these hands too.
Yeah. I mean,
Finally,
no,
like,
after
after the third one, someone's like, you don't have to have
Yeah.
a7 or deuce.
I was gonna say, I don't think people would have told him if they knew that that's what he thought.
Oh, for
you know?
sure. I mean, everyone likes Dana.
Yeah.
Our hand begins with the action folding around to Keno in the cutoff with King 10 offsuit, and he decides to open it up. Now, if you're not sure who Keno is, he's the guy that made this extremely accurate comment about the PokerStars rake increases.
Today's a tough day for Poker Stars.
Okay.
Today, what happened today?
They raised the rake.
They also lowered the rake.
Oh, really?
They lowered the rake on time tournaments, and they raised the penny up. They went from 1 penny to 2 penny on other ones. But everyone's going nuts. They actually cut their time
Sounds like a
tournaments in
100%
half.
increase to me.
Well, the time. No, the time. He knows it would be, right?
Needless to say, this guy is good with numbers. Anyway, he does decide to open up the King 10. Now the action is on Negreanu in the small blind, who looks down at ace-queen suited. Now this is a mandatory 3-bet. This hand is way too good to be flatting, and Negreanu does decide to raise and bumps up to 3,000. I like this size a lot. I think out of position, particularly as you get deeper, you want to use some 4.5 to 5.5x sizes. You can even really realistically go bigger if you want to as well. The general idea is that you want to cut down on the implied odds for the in-position player to be able to call. And maybe not even implied odds so much as their direct odds to be able to call profitably. If you make this, for example, 3,000, it's going to be hard to profitably call with some of the worst ends of your opens in your range, like the lowest pocket pairs, or maybe some suited 1-gappers or the weaker offsuit broadways. So essentially, this size really knocks down the in-position player's ability to flat you with a wide array of holdings. Now, once he does decide to go 3,000, this is where things start to heat up a little bit. Justin Young looks down in the big blind at ace-queen as well, although this one's an offsuit variety. Now, this is kind of an interesting spot. We've talked about 3 and 4 betting a decent amount on this channel. We talked a lot about it in a video we did recently where I showed you an old episode of Poker Hands when Dan Coleman had aces. So you guys should be kind of aware of some of the things going on. But in general, I would say a good rule of thumb for you, particularly newer players, never just call a 3-bet if you've not entered the pot yet. So in this spot as Justin, he should either be 4-betting or he should be folding. You could maybe make the argument that you could work in like a small call range occasionally and then sometimes trap, but I do think that the overall value of that strategy doesn't add much, and meanwhile it adds a lot of complexity to your ranges. So I would say in general, avoid cold calling 3-bets with really any hands, either 4-bet or fold. So the question now becomes, is ace-queen offsuit the kind of hand that we'd want to 4-bet? And I think the answer is certainly some of the time, or maybe even most of the time. You're always going to want to be doing this with hands like ace-king or 9s plus. And ace-queen has good removal. The thing is, if we use all of our ace-queens, that is a lot of combinations. And if we use a lot of our ace-jacks as well, or king-queens, then it can be a bit much. I would say you should mainly 4-bet here, and then once in a while let your ace-queen offsuit go. Anyway, he does decide to 4-bet, and once again, I really like the size that was chosen here. He goes 8,000. Now, for some of the same reasons why we liked Negreanu's 3-bet out of position, the size, we like Justin's 4-bet in position here, because by going 8K, it puts Negreanu in some tougher spots with more of the middling part of his range. And that's really kind of what you want to accomplish here with your bet sizes in general. Same with Negreanu's 3-bet. The middling hands get kind of crushed and aren't sure what to do. And in this spot, because Negreanu's out of position, he's going to have to make some maybe kind of awkward decisions with a hand like, let's say, 10-9 suited or ace-queen offsuit, or maybe even a hand like ace-5 suited. These things aren't exactly clear what he should be doing, and those hands should certainly be in his 3-bet range. Now, Kino makes a very wise fold here and gets out of the way. Action back over on Negreanu. Now, with ace-queen suited here, I don't think you have much option. Way too strong to fold. You're not really going to want to have many 5-bets here at all, if you even want to have any. And either way, I wouldn't want ace-queen suited in that range, because if you get jammed on, you have to fold. And that's kind of a disaster for a hand as strong as ace-queen suited. So the correct play here is to call, which he does. And hey, look, everyone played pre-flop pretty much perfectly. Let's take a flop.
Into the muck. The ace
No,
queen
he's not like
square
me.
off on a queen high
He is
all
older,
spade
he's like
flop, which certainly
16,
favors
maybe.
Justin
Yeah,
Young.
you got the
Like
RV.
Maine or something?
Not the guy at the RV.
No.
Cigars? No.
The flop is an extreme action flop. Queen, Jack, 10, all spades. Tons of hands have gotten here across the board. Both players should have queens, jacks, 10s, all definitely in play for either of them. Both players should have ace-king, definitely a hand that would take this line from both of them. Both players should have some hands like queen, jack suited, or jack 10 suited, or ace X of spades, maybe a little more for Justin than for Negreanu. But this is the kind of board that smashes both of their ranges, and people should be getting pretty aggressive when they have either good equity or strong hands, and you're definitely going to want to deny equity in this situation. This board can change a lot on turns and rivers. If we get a spade, the entire texture is different. If it pairs, there are now tons of boats. If a 9 or a king comes, like the chance of a straight is huge. So this is a board you want to tread lightly, and you don't want to be trapping unless you maybe have that nut flush. Anyway, Negreanu checked what he should do with all of his hands, and now the action's over to Justin. And again, I think that this is a really interesting spot. I actually think there are a lot of interesting spots here in this hand. But this is an interesting spot now for Justin between bet and check, because he can decide to go ahead and bet. And look, when the pot is 17K and you have 50K behind, it's going to be hard for bet to ever not make you money, because your equity is so good. It almost doesn't even matter what he has unless he flopped a flush. You're going to have, let's just say, 36 to 40% equity, probably closer to 40% equity against anything else the guy can possibly have. So realistically, this is a situation where I think that betting can't be bad. But it's not a question of does bet make money. And that's a problem I see oftentimes with poker players. They think if bet makes money, then I should bet. We have to compare the value of a check versus the value of a bet. If he checks back here, his hand plays extremely well on later streets, because if the board bricks, he's got top pair, top kicker to call down with some good removal. If the board changes drastically, either a spade or a king, he's got basically the nuts in both scenarios. Realistically, the only bad turns and rivers for him are going to be a 9 or an 8. So this is the kind of play where you check back because your hand has extremely good playability on later streets, and it's going to give you an opportunity to catch your opponent bluffing, which might become relevant a little later in this hand.
I don't know.
Forget.
Both
He's in my
players check, and
Dean
now
RV,
Young
so I don't
has
know.
the nut flush.
No, that's not him. I haven't seen him for a couple years, actually.
Daniel picking a bad time to lead out for 4,500.
The turn comes the 3 of spades, and this gives Justin a fairly disguised nut flush. Now, advanced players realize that just because they check the flop doesn't mean they don't have the nut flush, because a lot of hands can make sense as a check. Maybe not ace-king, for example, where you have a straight. You're going to want to bet with that one and build a pot. But with a hand like ace-queen, ace-jack, ace-10 with the ace of spades, all definitely hands that could check the flop. Here is the thing, though. When you do have ace-queen, which is a lot more likely than ace-jack and ace-10, you're going to be checking the flop. But because you don't have those other hands very often at all pre-flop, the main hand that has the nut flush here is ace-queen. And you want to be thinking about how often these combinations should be in your opponent's range. A mistake I see people make frequently is they think like, oh, well, I'm not going to make assumptions about what they should or shouldn't have and then make sweeping statements about it. And while that's true to an extent, you never want to completely go crazy with assuming someone can't have a hand. But the thing is, if you 4-bet here in Justin's shoes pre-flop with hands like ace, jack, and ace 10 a lot of the time, well, those plays are going to lose money, and their overall strategy will lose, even if it gives them a few more nut flushes in this particular instance. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. He's got the nuts, and now it's on Negreanu, and we got to decide what he wants to do. Now, Negreanu has a bit of a weird spot here because he can certainly have some worse hands. His hand isn't very good. He loses to any spade, and maybe a hand like aces or kings decide to trap the flop. But realistically, he's going to lose to basically all of the value portion or even middling portion of Justin's range. However, he also does have some worse hands here. He can have hands like king queen or king jack or jack 9 or 10-9 suited, but not really too many hands. So I think this is actually a really close spot for Negreanu between wanting to bluff or deciding to check. One of the things I don't like about bluffing with ace queen here is that the ace of diamonds is a card that I would kind of like my opponent to have. It makes them a lot more likely to have a hand like ace queen of diamonds or ace jack or ace jack of diamonds or ace 10 of diamonds. I recognize that Negreanu has ace queen of diamonds here, but the point remains you don't want to block the weaker hands in your opponent's range. You want to block the stronger ones. So because of that, I lean towards bluffing some of those other candidates, but if you want to throw ace queen suited in the mix every now and then, that seems totally fine as well. Generally speaking, in these spots that are very polarized when you're out of position and the board changes drastically, you want to be doing a lot of checking because if you bet too frequently, you really can't protect your range. Another thing to think about here is that Negreanu actually doesn't have one spade hands very often at all. In fact, try to name some that he could have pre-flop. Maybe ace queen offsuit calls the 4-bet, but it also might not. Other than that, what hands can he really have? Ace king with a spade? Name another one. In these situations, maybe 9s with a spade, I guess also could make sense, 9s or 8s with a spade. So generally speaking, in these situations, when you're out of position and you don't have many flushes, you want to primarily be checking. And that's another good reason to lean towards some of those other candidates we decide we might want to bluff. This could also be a reasonable spot to not have any bets at all. And if you do have a bet range, it should probably be a pretty small portion of all of your holdings. Anyway, Negreanu does decide to bet and he bets 4,500. I also dislike this size. I guess it's an all right decision if he's going to do it with a ton of different spades, but now we're starting to have a high bet frequency in a spot where I don't think this card is advantageous for us. I think when Justin checks back the flop, he's going to have a hand that has decent playability, and so he's going to definitely have some hands with a spade in them a decent portion of the time. That makes me feel like this card hits him a little bit more, and because the 4-better has more offsuit combinations, he also might just have more spades in his range to begin with. For these reasons, I don't like a small bet with many hands. I think it's a good spot to mainly check and work in large bets and with a polarized range. Anyway, Negreanu bets 4,500, and now Justin has to decide with the nuts what to do. And I think in a very polar spot like this, you gotta just call. It's very likely the guy's bluffing because realistically, how many value combos are there left when you have the ace of spades? So you gotta just call and let him hang himself on the later streets.
Now 4 to a straight out there. Make things even worse on the ace queen of diamonds.
$16,000.
Negreanu firing 16,000.
The river comes the 9 of diamonds, which is kind of an interesting card because now, even though obviously the flushes beat the straights, a lot of potential bluff hands have become straights and now have a little bit of showdown value. Now, I'm not saying that they have a ton of showdown value. It's hard to think of too many hands that you can beat when Justin calls the turn. Maybe a hand like aces, maybe a hand like 10-9 suited that made a pretty light turn call. I mean, there are many hands. You have to get kind of creative to think of hands that you can beat. Maybe a hand if Justin just has Barry's queen. That could be another one that could check back call turn. But it does change things a little bit. When you have a range that bets the turn, and some of those bluffs now have a small amount of showdown value, they're not as good of bluffs as the really, really weak hands here. So with Negreanu's range, if he does decide to bet hands like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, this feels to me like a pretty mandatory river bluff. Now, because I would not bet the turn with ace queen as much, I don't like this hand as much on the river as well. I prefer the ace jack and ace 10s, but this is a great hand to do it with. Honestly, in this spot, you're going to have to bluff with some air balls, and this is about the airballiest air ball you can possibly have. Now to Justin, what to do with the nuts. I think in this situation, you've got a pretty clear spot to just min raise or jam. They're relatively similar. I tend to lean towards just always raising the least you possibly can in these spots because you're saying you have the nuts or nothing. And realistically, it's not a spot you're even able to bluff because Negreanu should have a lot of ace of spades here. And even though you might put a hand like the king of spades in a tough spot if you jam, the primary hand that Negreanu could have is the ace of spades. So you min raise in this situation and kind of hate it because frankly, it's obviously value, but you just got to do it.
Sitting in a small bonfire in front of him.
Owen.
Oh.
Goodbye, 16,000.
That's the key one. That's a good one to see.
Maybe it was the royal.
Wonder what would happen if I went in
Yeah,
pre-flop. I could have. Good enough.
Yeah, what's the high hand too?
It was close. I don't know what I would do in all honesty.
Yeah, then I had you before the flop.
The lesson here today is that when you're bluffing in poker, you can lose your shirt, no matter how outrageously small the shirt you're wearing is. Thanks for joining me for today's episode of Poker Hands. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys again soon.